So welcome everyone to this talk and discussion with the amazing Grace Schireson. I'm sorry, amazing Dr. Reverend Grace Schireson. This talk brought to you by the Buddhist Action Coalition. My name is Dorothea Mendoza and I organized with Buddhist Action Coalition, aka BAC, aka BAC. BAC was founded back in, let me get this right, February 2018 from a conference with more than 300 Buddhists from different lineages and traditions. And since then, we've participated in several racial justice, social justice, and climate crisis actions. And this past October, we launched this talk and discussion series. And the purpose really is to kind of investigate together the Dharma and what it means to be an engaged Buddhist. So this talk and discussion tonight is our third of that series. So our program will be simple. We'll hear from Grace and then we'll have a Q&A afterwards. And then towards the end, there will be some very, very exciting news, announcements that you really would want to stay for and hear about. Really exciting announcements, I promise you. So on to Grace Schireson. I have to correct myself, sorry. Dr. Reverend Grace Schireson. That's a joke. Maybe she'll tell you about it.
Yeah. We showed up here and I'm glad to see everyone. Am I ready to talk, Dorothea, or do you have more?
No, man, let me introduce you, Grace.
Okay,
hold on. I would like to introduce you. So Grace is a Zen abbess. She's kick-ass, by the way, in the Suzuki Roshi lineage, empowered by Sojun Mel Weitzman. She's the president of Shogoku Zen Institute. She's a clinical psychologist at the Wright Institute in Berkeley. And she founded 2 practice and retreat centers under the Central Valley Zen Foundation. I think I got that right, Central Valley Zen Foundation. And among the books she's written are Naked in the Zendo, Stories of Uptight Zen, Wild as Zen, and Enlightenment Wherever You Are. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. A lot of us recommend it. And also a book called Zen Women Beyond Tea Ladies, Iron Maidens, and Macho Masters. Another great read. And of course, she has many articles in Buddhist magazines, including one on Zen women ancestors and one about dirtying the Zendo with her white tabi socks. So what the bios online, though, do not tell us about Grace is that she really has this grounding presence in demonstrations and protest actions in the streets. I first met her at a demonstration in front of Chuck Schumer's apartment building here in Brooklyn by Prospect Park a couple of years ago. And she's tall. Well, of course, everyone's tall because I'm short, but she's tall. And what really struck me was there was this graceful and grounded presence. And I thought, there is something very wise in this woman. And I wondered, what treasures does she hold in that wise, big mind of hers? So here tonight to investigate the question of how do we bring forth social justice without exacerbating anger and hatred in ourselves or others, to offer techniques for watching our mind and knowing its tricks in service of right action. Please welcome, with a bow, Roshi Grace Schireson.
Are you ready now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you all for showing up. I'm very happy to see you. And if you could, in the chat, tell me what type of Buddhism you practice, because I just like to get a flavor of our soup tonight. Dorothea mentioned Shogoku Zen Institute, which I can't recommend highly enough, even if I tried for this whole talk. Shogoku Zen is the way we are trying to get Zen to meet our culture by offering a Masters of Divinity. An MDiv is something that's recognized across religions, and a Zen priest is a little mysterious to people. So we're offering a full course load. We studied all of the MDiv programs across the US and are offering courses, and mostly from the Zen perspective, but don't hold that against us. Check out shogakuzen.org or Shogoku Zen Institute and see if you want to join us for any of the classes. We currently have a class coming up where we're going to take responsibility for our racism and racism in Buddhist history. So that's first thing. And I wanted to also mention that we don't have to look too far right now for our subject matter. Most of us, if not all of us, are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from the past 4 years, which seem like about 20 years. And, you know, I used to have red hair. Now it's white. No, I'm kidding. It was always dark. But in any case, that happened in the last 4 years. Not really. But we are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and we need to address it so we don't deplete ourselves going forward. We need to continue to see the universe, and especially the world we live in, as our zendo or as our meditation room. Yes, it's possible to get the link. It's shogakuzen.org, I believe. In any case, our practice on the cushion is not to get us to be good at meditation, but actually to help us to have the fullest possible life that benefits everyone we come into contact with. So that works well with political action. I'm during this pandemic where I've been confined mostly to my pajamas in my house, I've been studying Spanish, and my Spanish teacher always asked me, well, what are you doing this week so we can have a conversation? And I told him about this talk. He said, well, is it psychology or is it Buddhism? Well, I think the Buddha was the first psychologist that we know of who talked about thoughts and the mind as determining one's life. But I want to start out by offering a moment of Zen. We have John, what's his name, on TV who offers a moment of Zen. And so I'm just going to ring a bell and up after I give you a koan to work with, because this is a special gift of Zen, our koans. And koans are the encapsulation of a moment of eternity for opening your mind. So here's the one I'm going to offer you now. A monk asked Uman, what is it when the tree withers and the leaves fall? That certainly describes the situation we've been in. The tree withering, our ideas of justice withering, the leaves falling. And the leaves fall whether we give them permission to fall or not. Uman answered to what is it when the tree withers and the leaves fall? He answered, and Uman was in Tang Dynasty, China. I don't know whether the year was 500 or 800, but give or take. Uman said, the body is exposed in the golden wind. So just take a moment to allow yourself to be immersed in the golden wind. I'd like you to come back, and if you have something to say in the chat about what you experienced in the golden wind, please put in the chat and let me see what's happening with you. The moment of the golden wind is actually here for us all the time. And that's what shapes our experience of life and replenishes our ability to be present. So something happens and something beautiful can happen. And I want to go to where psychology is meeting Buddhism and mindfulness right now through Richard Davidson's teachings. The brain is shaped by experiences. And because we have a choice about what experiences we want to use to shape our brain, we have a responsibility to choose the experiences that will shape the brain toward the wise and the wholesome. This is a very important teaching. The brain is very, what they call neuroplastic. We see that with children, especially children who've had an injury to the brain. It's like another part of the brain can take over. Listen, after a while, we're not so neuroplastic, but still, we are. The brain and its functions are shaped by our experiences. And in reverse, the neurotransmitters, the parts of the brain, the amygdala, and so on, also shape how we experience the world. So we have habits, skills, and behaviors that lead to changes in the brain. This is why it's so important for us to take a moment of reverence and meditation. Repeated over time, these short-term states become part of who we are. Nowadays, after many, many years of meditation, let's see, 52 for me, maybe, or 54, when I approach negative experiences, I start to breathe more deeply. That's the habit that's become a state change in my brain. And that state change has become a long-term habit and ability. But as I said, it interacts with our experience, and the experiences we have interact with our brain. So these experiences, and especially when we use mindfulness, presence, reverence in a moment of meditation, it becomes a superpower for us. And we can use it to restore ourselves, which we definitely need. My teacher in Japan, this book, I'm not sure if Dorothea mentioned it, that I edited of his talks, Zen Bridge, by Keito Fukushima. He talked about Zazen as ramen. You know, you can make ramen in 3 minutes. You can do Zazen in 3 minutes, or meditation. He said Zazen. But you can do meditation for 3 minutes, and you could do meditation for 3 breaths to restore yourself throughout the day. And it's very important. It's very important because it's actually medically known, now that we have functional MRIs that test out brain states, that there is a greater focus in the brain on negative experiences. So That is because as we evolved as humans and came out of our cave and there was a tiger there, it was much more important for us to remember there's a tiger roaming outside our cave in order to survive than it was for us to notice the foliage. So the negative experiences really stick in the brain. We learn much faster from these painful experiences. By learning, I mean it shapes the brain more. And it's very hard to undo these effects, as we've noticed over these past 1,400 years that we've just been through. So negative experiences are stored longer in memory. And I must say, as a person of 74 years old, that I have such a vast storehouse of stupid things I've done through my life. And over again, I remember them. And I have to have a method by which I dispel them. Otherwise, I spend my entire life in regret. And so this is a very important learning. And especially as you get older, you recognize, oh, geez, that was really a mistake. Oh, no, that was terrible. And you can be consumed by it. But old or young, these negative experiences are actually causing us a lot of extra stress. And we need all of our strength and energy and good health to move forward. So I believe Rick Hansen said, most good experiences are wasted on the brain. So how do we really work to bring positive experiences that protect our brains and therefore affect everyone that we're around? So let's talk about some of the things that actually help. Some of them you probably know about. Exercise. I'm sorry to say decreased calorie intake, because I know many of us have been on a pandemic diet of high carbs. Intermittent fasting actually increases a brain chemical that helps the neurons, and healthy fats, the omega-3s, for example. So these factors are very important for changing what otherwise is the negative, sticky negativity that is taking over. And particularly as activists, when we're concerned about some of these things that are going on in the world. Examples of neuroplasticity that they show are, for example, in London, where they have to learn all the names of the streets, the knowledge for cab drivers. They note changes in the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory. In meditating monks, they can measure with functional MRIs changes in the anterior cingulate gyrus, the insula, and other parts of the brain. So these things can be measured. But how is it we work on increasing the brain's ability to take in the positive experiences that are hard for the brain to take in? First of all, I want to talk about the rule of threes. When you have a negative thought arise, and hopefully your mind is becoming more transparent to you as you've done some meditation in a Buddhist tradition, so that you don't just act out what you're thinking or feeling, but you actually see it there. It crosses your mind. So the rule of three means when you note a negative thought, you immediately turn towards three things of beauty or positivity. And I'll be out for walks, huffing and puffing about the last 1400 years we've been through in this administration. And I'll notice, oh gosh, my mind, here I am outdoors. Let me look. I see the golden leaves on the tree. I feel the sweet breeze. I'm in California right now, so it's not snowing. I feel the sweet breeze on my skin. And I see this magnificent sky, which is vast. So for you, when you notice you're having negative thoughts, they aren't going to help the work that you're doing in social action. So it's very important to note the things that will help you let go of the sticky negative thoughts, and practice that throughout the day, as well as acts of kindness. One of the things I noticed, first of all, once the pandemic started, and let's face it, we were all pretty well worn down by this current problem we were having in our government. So when the pandemic started and I resorted to my pajamas and staying in bed for many hours, I recognized this was not going to help my state of mind. And so I had to go back to my experiences for when I started practicing meditation. What did help? And I remembered very early on that I used to work for the YMCA in Berkeley. I used to borrow a van when I was in college at Berkeley and drive out to West Oakland to the projects. And at first they would send me to tutor in classes, but then I realized that's not helping. So I would take, they were junior high school kids, take them to the beach. Some of them had never seen the beach before. Some of them had never had fresh fruit before. And so this helping them, this act of engaging with them, helped my depression. And that's what I had to return to. The only thing that has really helped when I get down is to enact kindness towards others. So I must say, if you wonder how I could be depressed after 54 years of Zen practice, you have to understand, my father died when I was 6 and nobody knew how to talk to children about that at the time. So usually children who are depressed before age 10 are going to be depressed for their whole lives. So no wonder I became a psychologist and became interested in Zen Buddhism and working on my own mind. So these are ways that you can change actually the structures and the neurotransmitters in your brain so that you're having a different experience. And therefore, when you're having a different experience, you're affecting the world around you, which then also changes your experience and your brain. So let's define some of the things that actually help. I did mention exercise and of course a healthy diet. But one of the strongest modulating factors for the brain is relationships. So because humans evolved in a tribe, the notion of being connected to other people is very deep in our DNA and in our brains. And it really affects how we feel. And if any of you have been with a partner for many years, you've been through fights, you know, you know how that affects you. I've been married for some 50, I think it's going on 53 years now. So I know that we create a climate for each other, but we actually have an effect on brain structures. So this is very important because we've been through a very difficult time with our relationships. My brother is no longer speaking to me. He is a supporter of the one who I won't name. It's time for that to be out of our vocabulary. And the last time he called me or texted me, it was about the whole Hunter Biden frou-frou on Tucker Carlson. And I was just in a very low place. This is before the election. And I was rather harsh with him about that. But believe me, if you haven't seen harsh from me yet, you don't know me very well. So I was extremely harsh with him. And he reciprocated by his usual, you're dead to me, and blah, 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 and so on. Now, I can't do anything about that relationship. Some of you may have family that you need to reconcile with, even though they support the one who will not be named. We can't necessarily change their views. And what I had asked of my brother was that he not talk to me about that, because there was no way we're going to agree, and there was only going to be arguing back and forth. And his idea of arguing was just proving me wrong. That was what he believed about my arguments. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. So we can't change those views. I did previously have a relationship with my brother, even though we had these different views, by putting that aside. That may or may not work for you. I do not harbor bad feelings for my brother for having these views. Sometimes I do, but again, I have my techniques to dispel those bad feelings. The reason I don't harbor resentment is because I realized that as a child, he was physically abused by our father. And he has suffered a lot in his life from some of those consequences. And he married one of his big buxom blondes, many of which are in his history. And she's a big fox and supporter of the one who won't be named. And so he's in a kind of a bubble. He lives in Texas now, even though he was raised as a liberal in Los Angeles. So I understand the causes and conditions. I would like to have a loving relationship with my brother, but I can't if he doesn't allow me. And right now I'm not allowed. So I'll just wait. And for some of our relatives, we need to wait. You know, they have some ideas about what's about to happen that are really frightening to them. And so there's no point in arguing about this. And we have to realize that we can't change them. And not only that, right now it looks like there's about 73 million of them. So this is pretty overwhelming. But the quality of our relationships are very important to our well-being. So it's important when the time comes, if it comes, to be available for love and compassion. And it may come and it may not. And we don't have an easy way to fix this. If we did, this would have been over a long time ago. So I wanted to mention that as a very important modulating factor in our well-being. But let's get to something that may have come up for some of you when you thought about or allowed yourself to experience the golden wind. And that is awe. Now, awe is something that we have when we look at the heavens at night, when we look at the sky. Sometimes prior to the pandemic, when we see large groups of people and we recognize we're only one among so many. And also during our spiritual practice, there may be the arising of awe. So we have conceptual vastness as a source of awe, which is science at times. We find a perceptual vastness as a source of awe, our place in the universe, and our experience of being connected to spiritual energy is also a source of awe. Inspiration by others. And this is why it's so important for us to do what we can for the sake of goodness, because it affects others and it may inspire others and brings up awe. Now, why am I emphasizing awe more so than other positive feelings? Because the studies that have been done with functional MRIs with variety of emotions, pride, love, joy, contentment, compassion, and amusement, of all of those, including awe, awe had the largest effect on lowering inflammation in the body. So this is very important for us to recognize that these spiritual and religious experiences that we have are a great source of healing. So as I've mentioned to you so far, there is the practicing of three things to work with dispelling negative thoughts in the mind. Of course, there's taking a deep exhalation, which is what I do when I am in my stream of regrets for my whole life, because I have children and I have grandchildren and I have a husband and I've had students, and for sure I've done dumb things in all of those situations and my professional life. So when I'm in my stream of regret, what I do is take a very deep breath and forcefully blow out as if I am dispelling these regrets. Because if regret were useful, and if shaming oneself was a useful tool, this would be a perfect world. We wouldn't have any problems. But unfortunately, it doesn't work. It doesn't make things better. So what we've learned in studying the brain is that having positive experiences does help. So there's the deep exhale and deep inhale and exhalation. There is being awestruck. There is being awestruck. There's a new book out called Awestruck. I forget who wrote it, but it was a person that I took a class with. Anyway, being awestruck, because awe, as we found, is one of the most positive experiences, because I think it puts us and our problems in perspective. And it leaves us with a connection to a really beautiful universe. Then there is the noting of the three things that are uplifting. And finally, something that we can practice because of spending time meditating and allowing our minds to quiet down. There's something called savoring. Earlier on, I think it was Rick Hansen who said positive experiences are wasted on the brain, not if you savor them. So sometimes when people say good things to us, we go, ah, shucks. In fact, we should be taking it in. It's like, more. Give me more. Let me feel this positivity. Let me feel this admiration. Let me feel this. So savoring, taking a moment to savor. And this is something that all of our practices, whether they be the Vajrayana or Thich Nhat Hanh practices or mountains and rivers, all of the practices, the peacemakers, all of them give us an opportunity to be present. And being present, it allows us to savor something in this moment. So I want to finally conclude with what some of the parts of having a healthy, socially active life and a life of practice are about. First of all, engagement, which you are doing. Positive emotions, which I'm teaching you about and which I'm sure you're aware of. Accomplishments, feeling like you're actually making a difference. And that goes into the next one, meaning. Having meaning in your life. Something means something to you. For me, it's about I'm here to help as many people as I can. That's the meaning of my life. What is yours? You need to answer that. And maybe you can in the chat. And finally, relationships. The relationships that you have and then you nurture. And that sometimes you have to say to yourself, do I want to be right or do I want to be in relationship? And asking that question can guide you into what is next going to come out of your mouth. So I wanted to conclude there and let you all tell me what is the most meaningful thing in your life in your chats. And then I'll also take questions.
Thank you so much, Grace. I was taking notes the whole time, as I'm sure many of us are. Like I said earlier, this is being recorded and will be available for those who visit the Buddhist Action Coalition website. So now, thank you so much. Thank you. We open up for questions or any thoughts that you'd like to share with Grace. You can either raise your blue hand, your blue virtual hand, or you can put your question or thoughts in the chat, as Grace mentioned. Donna, please go ahead. I shall, yeah.
Thanks for that, Grace. That was awesome. I'm also a therapist. I'm a LCSW, and yeah, especially right now, people are really struggling with just everything, you know, electoral stuff, the pandemic, you know, you name it. And I actually wanted to comment on what Eric put in the chat about Zazen opening you to the suffering of the world, and that can be overwhelming if you're not balancing it with that sense of awe. And I think that is so true, because I think a lot of us are drawn to it, to Buddhist practice, whether it's Zazen or something else, because we feel that already. You know, we feel that suffering and we feel that pain, and we're looking for some way to deal with it. For me, I feel like if I didn't also feel that, it would be so hard to just live, you know, just like staying alive would be like so hard, you know, and being able to experience that awe and realize like, this actually is a beautiful world. This actually is paradise. Like we can make it hell, but it actually is paradise. And those connections with other people, you know, with Sangha, with community, and being involved in meaningful work and meaningful action is like, that's everything. Like that, you know, that, yeah, that helps me stay alive.
Yeah.
Thank you, Donna. There's a Lori Lehman who has a question. Would you like me to read your question for you, or would you like to unmute yourself, Lori?
Hi, yeah, hi, I'm Lori. In my meditation community, we have a racial justice group, and we're having some difficulty around the experience of anger. Some of us feel that the anger we're feeling about the different injustices in the world is kind of a motivating force, and others feel that they want to be able to put the anger aside so they can go forward. And so there's been we're having difficulty with that. So we're going to do some reading and discussion. So I wanted to know what you thought.
Well, I think Buddhists are very conflict averse. So when anger comes up, Buddhist people don't generally like the expression of anger. On the other hand, and how many hands we're going to have here, is injustice itself is motivating. Justice is one of the most beautiful concepts in the world, which is so lacking from this world. And we can orient towards justice and towards caring for those for whom injustice is served as a regular diet. And while we're angry, we need to acknowledge there is anger in my body, because sometimes what happens, I remember one time I was on a march, and I've been protesting since I was at Berkeley in the 60s. So I was on a march, and I was a rather young person, and I was so angry about whatever was going on. Probably we were marching on the draft board in Oakland. And somebody bumped into me. And I had so much anger in me about the protest. I was like, stop that. And then I turned around, and that person was blind and had a white cane. So we need to be careful, because anger is extremely powerful and toxic. And yet when we feel it, we should not just cover it up or try to get rid of it. So how we process anger, talk it through, make use of it for the action without letting it take over as a toxic force in our body. This is very important, and there's not a simple answer for it. But loving justice, this is a good thing. This brings out love.
Okay, so one needs to kind of shift from the anger we're feeling about the injustice towards a feeling of commitment to the justice that we want to see. Is that one?
That would be one method. But on the other hand, we cannot bypass the anger that we're experiencing with some kind of spiritual explanation. We need to say, I'm angry. Okay, I'm angry about this injustice, but how angry am I about some of the things that have happened in my own life, some of my own traumas? How can I process that as well? Because sometimes the anger, while it would seem to be towards the injustice, is also very personal to us. And it's much easier, I know it's much easier for me to be angry about things and to be protective towards other people than it is for me to feel some of that sympathy for myself. I remember once I was sitting in a therapy session, and I saw, usually my door was locked, but the door to my therapy office started to turn. The doorknob started to turn as if someone was coming in. And I was kind of paralyzed by that fear. And I saw the patient in front of me. And seeing that patient in front of me, I was able to leap up and slam that door and lock it. So how we come out of some of these, but by processing, not by covering up with a spiritual bypass, how we come out of these sources of anger and neglect we've had towards ourselves, and turn some of that positive inquiry. What about my life? What about my justice? What has happened to me that makes this so painful? We need to address those issues as well.
Good. Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. And I think related to that, Jenny, you have something here to share with us?
Yes, hi. Sorry, my video isn't quite working, and also my throat is not working that well. I'll try to read it. Thank you so much, Grace, for coming on. It's wonderful to hear you speak. My question is that in relationships during this 4 years, yeah, you're right to call it 1400 years. It seems that long. I've noticed that many of my friends, when I talk to them, you kind of can't help but touch on all of these injustice topics, right? But so many of my friends, many of them are Buddhists, or many of them are not. Some of them are Asian and some are not, but many of them are dealing with it by avoiding talking about it when you bring up certain subjects. And how do I get around their I guess, avoidance of wanting to discuss stuff that's uncomfortable, or maybe the administration and all of the anger that has been put out for 4 years. They just don't want to talk about it with their friends. They just want to have a good time with their friends. But I would love to have meaningful, genuine conversations with my friends who don't want to avoid. How can I get them to do that?
Well, those who want to avoid need to avoid until they're ready to talk. And there are people who do want to talk. So how do you invite people to talk about this? One thing is to invite people to talk about a topic or a concept or a cause. Another is to say, gee, I'm feeling lonely. To make yourself vulnerable so that they want to reach out to you if they can. But how we invite people to talk about things rather than say, I think you're avoiding this and pointing the finger, how do we invite them by making ourselves vulnerable? And that for me has always been, I'm always up there on my soapbox, and it's harder for me to be vulnerable. But I find that by becoming vulnerable, people are more apt to talk about things. Is that helpful, Jenny?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, I see Bruce, my darling.
Yes.
Bruce has raised his hand.
Yes, kind of an amplification of what you were saying, Sensei Schireson. And I speak from experience. Anger is a kind of energy as far as I'm concerned. And you gave an example of using it the way I would recommend when you said you shut the door. That's not necessarily shutting the door is the idea, but transmuting the anger into productive action really solves a lot of the problem of anger for you. That's all I have to say. Yes.
Well, it's good to see you, Bruce. I see your library there. My goodness. It's like mine. My Spanish teacher said to me, why do you have so many books? There's the internet. I said, well, I got them before everything was available on the internet.
But I'll tell you something. I get tired of the internet. I get tired of TV, and I find books still a great refuge.
Yeah, they are. But I want to say more about the anger. It's so important for us to experience the anger before we do anything with it, so that we aren't kidding ourselves and we aren't trying to cover it up. So sometimes, and another thing about this injustice, which I meant to bring up in the talk, is you need to have your most beloved cause. Not everything. You may protest everything, but please try to have your most beloved cause, the one that really breaks your heart, to work towards. And for me, it was the immigrant families and the children at the border. And when I could, over and over again, I went there. I went to Brownsville, Matamoros. I saw the camps there. I went to so many of the places, San Diego. I went to Oklahoma with the Buddhists. So that was a cause for me that I looked at. And that was my guiding star in this, because I love children. And it brought out my love and my protectiveness. And for other things that I protested, against guns and so on, there was a big march for the young people of Florida. There was a big march in New York that I went to. Yes, I did care about that. But the one cause, the one injustice that really broke my heart, that was the one that guided me and still guides me through all my protests. And it's love and protection that I've turned to. Oh yes, I'm furious. But it's the love and protection that I can turn to for that cause.
Thank you for that, Grace. My beloved cause, my beloved homeland, the Philippines. A lot of things going on in the Philippines right now. Thank you so much. Okay, we have a question here from Tom. Do you know of groups who are starting to focus more on the vision of justice we now have the opportunity to work to achieve, instead of protesting the negative actions of others?
Do I know those? Probably, Dorothea, you know those better than I do because of being part of this Buddhist Action Council. But it's my experience right now, because I belong to the Soto Zen Buddhist Association, to the Association of Soto Zen Buddhists that's led by Japanese bishops, and to the American Zen Teachers Association, to the Lay Zen Teachers Association. I belong to all these groups. Everywhere I see discussions of Buddhist groups that are organizing to examine not only these issues in the world, but also in themselves. So I think if you, wherever you live, contact some group close to you and find out what they're doing along these lines, because most of them are doing something.
Thank you, Grace. Yes, there are a lot of grassroots organizations doing something out there. The mutual aid societies popping up everywhere. Yeah, we just have to look for them. And maybe if there's none, you start them. We start them ourselves. There's a question here, or questions from Brett. Brett, would you like to unmute yourself?
Okay, I can unmute myself. I was really, your story of your brother and seeing, and you spoke about causes and conditions and understanding those causes and conditions, which like shifted the energy. I'm just wondering, how can we get more insight about causes and conditions out there in this systems of injustice, so we have something to actually know we should change instead of just be against something? Can we get clarity from meditation about what is going on in institutional systems, so we know what it is we should change, like a law, like language in a law or a court precedence that needs court cases? This is how law changes. So what do you say in response to this question?
Well, I think belonging to groups that raise this question, and of course, your own meditation into opening your heart to people who have different views and different circumstances. So those are the two things that I see. What is it that you can raise as a question in the group? For example, I shared with you my most beloved cause. And you may have one, which is, how do we gain more insight about causes and conditions? That may be your beloved cause. And how do you invite people to question and investigate that with you and inspire you? You may be ahead of your time. Believe me, I've been there. When I wrote my book about Zen women, my own Dharma teacher told me to stop it. That my research on women in the Dharma was ego-driven. Of course, I didn't listen. What else is new? But you can be ahead of your time in pursuing this question about causes and conditions. But as the two places are in the groups, how do you invite others to share that with you? And how do you recognize that there are different causes and conditions for the people in the group? Make it so they may not be interested. And secondly, how do you investigate and open yourself to your own causes and conditions? What has shaped you and what shapes others? So those are two places I would look.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who'd like to share their thoughts and questions with Dr. Reverend Grace Schireson.
We all have, most of us are users of social media, and we've seen this outrageous Epstein article about Dr. Jill Biden calling her kiddo. And that's why we decided we would call me the Reverend Dr. Grace Schireson rather than just Grace.
Yes, and that author said that she did not have the right to carry that title doctor because she did not, only people who deliver babies should be called doctors,
Yeah.
he said.
Yeah.
So therefore, we're all doctors tonight. I am Dr. Dorotea Mendoza. So Dr. Dorotea Mendoza is inviting you all, if you have more questions and thoughts for Grace, feel free to raise your blue hand or put your question or thoughts right there on the chat.
I see something from Jules. Maybe it just showed up. Who knows with technology? But I don't see a question there, so I just wanted to open that up.
Yeah, I don't see anything else. So I have a question, Grace. Very practical. It's really very practical. Because like you said, a lot of us here are very involved with a lot of organizations. Very practical. I'm involved, like a few of my friends here that I can see, we're involved in, I would say, okay, this is an othering, excuse the othering, non-Buddhist organizations. And it's very challenging to carry the principles that we kind of want to practice as Zen practitioners, which including openness, having strong backs, but being open with open hearts. A lot of times in the organizations that I'm involved in, it's very like, this is how it's done. This is the theory, this is the analysis, this is how we're gonna get this done. And also there's a lot of competition between organizations. So my question is, do you have any techniques or whatever to kind of not be, I don't want to be, like teaching people.
Yeah,
I don't want to be teaching people. Yeah, but I do want to kind of, share it somehow.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so, there's a danger we have of getting into our own little clique, our own little club, and not being exposed to other people and other views. And on the other side of that is the question of how painful is it and how much energy does it cost you? And so only you can know what's going on with you when you're in such an organization. And I think it's very important for us as we try to hold up the sky here and justice, that we take care of ourselves. So you need to see what it's costing you to be in groups that are dogmatic or competitive. And since you have choices, which groups nourish you as well. And only you can know that by being there and being present to what's happening and looking at what you've accomplished with those groups. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, I need to sit with that, of course.
Yeah,
as always.
When you're in the group.
Yeah. Yeah, believe it or not, I've tried meditation, introducing meditation in a Marxist group, and it didn't work out very well.
No. But I'll tell you something. In my own home temple, let's see, is Ken Nab still here? In my own home temple, Berkeley Zen Center, my teacher objected to the fact that I needed a gluten-free diet and that I couldn't eat in the Zendo. So he said to me one time, you have to eat in the Zendo. And so I did, and which meant I didn't take any food. So then he said, we had a meeting, and I said, well, how was that? Me sitting there and not taking any food while other people were eating. And he said, oh, I thought it was a beautiful exercise in discipline. I said, uh-huh. Would you like to ask me how it was for me to be in that situation? And he said, how was it? I said, I was heartbroken. I was exhausted. I was hungry, and I felt cut off from the group. And I will not do that again. And in fact, if you can't accept that I have other needs, I can't sit with you because you are hurting me. You are hurting me. And you need to be able to be in a group and experience that. Is it actually accomplishing something? Are you actually part of the group? Are they valuing your participation? Are they allowing for your differences, even if they don't want to meditate? You can try the 3-minute zazen, the 3-breath zazen on them next time. But will they value you in any way? That's a question, because it's very painful, particularly for those of us who've been in undervalued groups, such as women and people of color, to be in a group where we're devalued. That's very costly. So think about that. You're worth something. How do you want to spend it?
That's a great question for everyone. How do we want to spend our moments? Are there other thoughts and questions from the beautiful people here?
I see we have another gluten-free person here.
Yes.
And
Bonnie, would you like to unmute yourself?
Oh, I just wanted to say I totally, sorry, my camera's not on. I totally empathize with that. I mean, sometimes in multiple organizations, like the deciding factor of how my day's gonna go is whether they accommodate gluten-free or not. And do I have to pack all my meals ahead of time and make arrangements to go eat in the parking lot? I mean, it's just, and it means a lot when people actually remember and they tell you like, oh, this sesshin, we made this all gluten-free, just, you know, because we remembered you. And then you feel like, wow, people here really get it. I feel really cared for. So I just related to that a lot.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing for me was, you know, I've had 2 teachers, the Soto teacher, Sojin Mel Weitzman in Berkeley Zen Center, and Fukushima Roshi, whose book I showed you, Zen Bridge, his book of lectures. And because of my experience with Sojin, I tried to hide my digestive problems from Fukushima Roshi when I was in Japan, which I ended up, if you read my book, Naked in the Zendo, I ended up fainting during sesshin. And when I explained to him, I can't eat your wheat noodles. I don't really eat rice. And, you know, I went through the list. Soy also is a problem for me. He sort of went through it all with me, and he said, you can't eat with us, but you need to find a way to eat and come sit with us however you can.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, one was a Rinzai, you know, very strict Rinzai master in Japan, and the other was an American teacher who who had that kind of macho practice.
Mm.
You know, you can't, if you have those kinds of weaknesses, it's in your mind. And I was very kind. I did not say, does that mean the heart surgery you had was in your mind, or the prostate surgery you had was in your mind? Just because you can't see it doesn't mean I don't have it. So we have to find people who love us and accommodate us. And it's one of the reasons I had such a wonderful benefit of doing koan practice in Japan over the course of a dozen years. I didn't stay there for 12 years, but I kept going back because I found myself a Japanese wife, a woman who cooked for me and did my laundry, a 5-minute walk from the temple. And that was how I accommodated. And he was fine with it. Just come sit when you can. That's the important thing, is that you can sit with us when you can and you find a way to actually nourish yourself. I thought that having these eating problems was a big problem, and I was kind of surprised. He said, oh, it's not such a big problem. And then I found out historically, this is just a funny part of the story, that he'd had a student who he had sponsored and brought over to Japan. I don't know what country he was from, but he got busted for drugs, and Fukushima Roshi had to deal with that. So I figured that was a bigger problem. It's important to have perspective on how big a problem you are.
Yeah, thank you. It sounds like sometimes like Westerners actually misinterpret the teachings, and they think, oh, it's all about hard discipline, like it is, but it's also about being practical and taking care of your life. So
yeah, I think that's right. I think that sometimes Westerners are trying to imitate what they think the Japanese are doing. And the Japanese, some of them I've practiced at various temples in Japan. Some of them understand what you need and will accommodate, and some of them won't. So again, it's about you finding, like Dorothea, finding the place that appreciates your needs and that you can flourish, where you can flourish.
I think that's good advice with everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. And thank you, Grace. I did not know what to expect, and this was really great. And I think we can take away a lot of really practical things from this. Because you're right, Grace, a lot of us here are very involved. If not with Buddhist Action Coalition, in some other organization, whether it be, for political actions or maybe more grassroots, all these things that you talked about, the rule of threes, the being awestruck, which is, I have to pay attention to that now, being awestruck, even in like, when you're doing things with your collective, sometimes you have that feeling of being awestruck, but then you don't pay attention to it. And the savoring the positive, and so many other things that you shared with us that I think will do so good for us and the world to carry with us in our many efforts, in our engaged Buddhism work. Because without, I think, like Grace said, without the place of justice and peace that's within, coming from this, within the peace and justice coming from, if that place is not peaceful or, have a sense of justice or being awestruck, then what are we actually putting out in the world when we're acting? So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for staying on. As promised, I have some exciting announcements to share with you. But before I start, Grace, please, do you have any last words for us?
Be well, take good care of yourselves. You are the Dharma vessels. You are holding up the heavens and keeping the earth moving. So take good care of yourselves. You are a cause that you need to love.
Thank you. And please do not go away. As I promised, I have very, very exciting announcements. So the first one, well, this is not an announcement. I hope you can spare a few dollars as Dana offering to our wonderful Dr. Reverend Grace Schireson. And a link will be on the chat. Please, Eric, share the link to where we can offer our Dana to Grace. Dana, as you know, is our traditional practice of showing gratitude and cultivating generosity. And the second is, yes, BAC, Buddhist Action Coalition, is an all volunteer organization. We do the work gratis, and every donation we get is funding our work. So if you can spare a few dollars also for BAC, that would be great. A link will be on the chat as well. And so now on to the very exciting announcements. Next month, as part of this talk and discussion series, we will have on January 14th, also a Thursday, also at 7:30, Alan Hosen Sinoki. He will talk and discuss with us what is an appropriate response in this age of pandemic, of systemic racism, of environmental crisis, and rising tides of violent nationalism. And just quickly, Alan is a co-abbot at Berkeley Sun Center. He was the executive director of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, and I think he's the founder and director of Clearview Project. But wait, most importantly, Alan is a folk musician and a poet. So maybe he will talk with us in musical or poetry form. So who knows? So the one way to find out is to come and find out for yourself. So the next exciting announcement is March. We will have the speaker and discussion series throughout 2021. And to keep updated, you can join our mailing list by putting your name and email address if you want on the chat, and you can direct message the host or the co-host so that your info is not shared with everyone. And so that's the mailing address. What's my next exciting announcement? I promised you more. Hold on. Oh, yes. In March, we will have our 3rd anniversary celebration. The Buddhist Action Coalition will be celebrating its 3rd anniversary. But really, this one will be a celebration of all Sanghas engaged Buddhism work. We are planning to have various Sangha representatives come and share what they've been doing or are doing in terms of racial justice, economic justice, social justice, climate crisis, undoing patriarchy. So we're going to try to invite Sanghas to celebrate with us, celebrate our work together as a collective, or maybe separate Sanghas, but celebrate with us. And I think that is the end of my exciting announcements of future events. I hope that was exciting enough for all of you. But returning to this moment, love and thank you to everyone for staying on and listening and sharing the space. And Roshi, Grace, Schireson, much love and gratitude for being here with us, for sharing your practice, and deepest gratitude for all your effort. Deep vows, thank you. Yes, Zen Women, that book by, oh, Grace, you unmute yourself. Thank you, everyone. Again, please sign your for the mailing list so that you'll get more exciting announcements from us.
Yes, I was just saying this moment with Jill Biden teaches us we are not out of the woods yet in studying our female ancestors and honoring them. So that's a book of all about the women and the struggles they went through to find their way to teaching. Bye-bye.
Yes, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Kuan Yin. See you.
Bye. Thank you.
Night, everybody. Thanks.